Her cause of death was listed as cardiopulmonary embolism. Alyssa died from an eating disorder.
They get lost and they fall through the cracks.
We're not seeing the gravity to which eating disorders are actually affecting way more % of the population than those that are diagnosed.
Absolutely, eating disorders are underreported.
When somebody dies, it's not put on their death certificate. You might die of heart complications, but not because of an eating disorder, although that is actually what's taken place.
I think there's some basic questions that still haven't been answered.
I always say that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And unfortunately, right now, there are no proper statistics for the amount of sufferers across the country that have an eating disorder.
The need for continued research and development into finding ways to actually help these individuals continues to be one of the most incredible challenges that faces us.
I think there's some basic questions that still haven't been answered that need to be answered. We haven't had a solid Canadian-based study looking at incidence or prevalence in this country for 15 plus years. Ideally, we want to prevent eating disorders.
So that eating disorders didn't show up in the first place.
When we talk about research in eating disorders, we kind of can begin with prevention. Ideally, we want to prevent eating disorders. That would be the best case scenario. And certainly investing in prevention is an area that we need to continue.
The amount of research that is looking at potential causes or contributing factors is so lacking.
We tend to operate on the back end of things, trying to clean up the mess once it's already there, instead of realizing how we could do things differently as a culture or as people or as families or as individuals so that eating disorders didn't show up in the first place.
Eating disorders are present in all sorts of people.
They are part of the milieu of societies.
Eating disorders in particular have been framed in the past as disorders of middle-class white girls who are young and thin. But I think that some people are starting to realize that eating disorders are present in all sorts of people.
Eating disorders are also a social condition. They are part of the milieu of society. So yes, medical research is great, but also social research, sociology, anthropology, these things we need research into. Across the gender spectrum, across class, across sexuality, we need to have intersectional research that's coming together around understanding something that is really complex.
People are really looking to brain science.
It could change things in a meaningful and substantial way.
There's a lot of research being done that's really interesting around the genetics of eating disorders and the brain-based relationship between eating disorders, kind of the causation around eating disorders. People are really looking to brain science.
There's been this recognition and realization that maybe there is indeed something neurological going on, and that's been an immense source of hope.
The neuroscience end of things is that actually can help us in terms of treatment and intervention and people understanding for themselves what's going on, so that treatment isn't like, oh, we'll do this to you, but it's more like, you're doing this to you, you're unfolding the covers and finding out what's going on for you so that you can make sense of it and at your own pacing.
Make people that are struggling and suffering from eating disorders better as quickly as possible.
Innovating the system to fit those people so that their experience would have been better.
And at present, a very small amount of money is spent annually on research into eating disorders in Canada, and almost nothing is spent on research into perhaps what is the most important area, which is the development of novel treatments. And without developing new treatments, we can't help the people that don't respond to our current treatments right now.
We need to collect information across the country using variables or measures that are used universally so that we can advocate for where we need more treatment and what types of treatments are needed.
I think we need to be researching different types of treatment, new types of treatment that are more accessible to people.
We need to work as partners provincially and nationally to understand better how we roll out the intervention, what those interventions look like. And some of those interventions are going to need to be community-based, and some of the interventions are going to need to be kind of more intensive and based in kind of local hospitals and tertiary care hospitals and university hospitals.
We have to be open to having conversations with people about what they think is going on, what they think can be helpful, and then do our best to integrate that input into what we can actually offer.
The Canadian granting agency simply does not provide the opportunity to get sufficient funds.
You need research to prove that you need funding.
I think the good news with research in eating disorders is that there are a number of very motivated and capable individuals across this country that are working really hard to bring solid data to the field. I think the unfortunate reality is that the overall number of people that are contributing is low. And that speaks to the need to invest in eating disorders.
Probably the number one problem facing us is this cyclical relationship between research and action and funding, where you need funding to do the research, to make the action happen based on research, but you need research to prove that you need funding.
Applying to Canadian granting agencies simply does not provide the opportunity to get sufficient funds to carry out the type of treatment trials that are required. And it's part of this systemic discrimination that people with eating disorders and their families suffer, that people who make policy about the distribution of research money also do not always consider these to be important conditions or even real conditions. And that discrimination just eats its way into all the policy around research funding allocation.
But we need to invest in a strategy for research. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that.